We're back, and let's, whether you want to or not, talk about social media. It definitely played a major role in the 2016 presidential election.
Just imagine if social media was available to our founding fathers. How would it have been used in 1776? And one of our panelists here, Richard, you actually had a little Twitter discussion of your own the other day.
That's right.
Who do you think would have been good on Twitter?
The winner would have been Benjamin Franklin. Obviously, he was a media creator. He was a publisher of newspapers. He was in the avant-garde of his day. And all those little sayings we remember, the Poor Richard Almanac sayings, those were Twitter-sized things that he dropped into his almanacs as fillers. So he knew how to write tight.
So
140 characters, no problem.
Would have been no problem for him?
No problem.
Huh.
John Adams, big problem.
I think most of them would have had a big problem. The vocabulary was bigger.
Yeah. The words are bigger.
Well, Jefferson writes frequently in the Declaration of Independence about usurpations. So he's taking up about 12 characters right there. And Jefferson wouldn't have worked for him, wouldn't have worked for Hamilton or Madison. I think my pick would have been Patrick Henry.
Okay, why?
Give me liberty or give me death. Probably only used 100 characters.
Yeah, with an emoji.
With an emoji.
I think the anti-federalists probably would have been best suited for, because passion, right, Amity? The passions that animated the discussion. We're here in New York, and after the Declaration and before the Declaration, everybody saw Hamilton, so now we can talk about, everybody knows about Hamilton, so now it's cool to talk about the founding again. But the passions were running high here in this city as people talked about independence, they talked about what the country ought to look like. But down south, the anti-federalists definitely had, they had a lot, they had a passion at least as much, probably more than what these guys had up here.
Well, that is correct. And when you're rebutting, you can be short. You just say no. So that's the fun of the back and forth. I want to intrude a non-framer into the Twitter competition with Coolidge because he was the most short-spoken of the presidents. There's a famous story where a lady asked him, she said, "I'd bet that I could get you to say more than 2 words tonight." And he said, "You lose." So I think he's king Twitter man.
Born for Twitter.
Born for Twitter.
I might be one of the only people at this table. I'm a pro-social media person. I recognize its faults, certainly, and I've been sort of on the receiving end of a lot of attacks. But I actually find it a great way to share a lot of information quickly and to find out what people are thinking. Do you think the founders would have bristled at the idea of all these people talking to each other and sharing information, or they would have liked it?
They would absolutely have learned it. These men were concerned to get their ideas out there.
Right.
Franklin was not the only publisher. Sam Adams was a publisher. Hamilton founded the New York Post, which is still publishing. They wrote journalism. Newspapers were the medium that they had, and they all exploited that. But if they came back now, they would be watching this. They'd be sitting down. They would be figuring out how do we use this.
I'm a little more critical of social media. I think it has done a lot. I mean, one of the things about social media, Twitter, Facebook, is that it does a lot of group reinforcement.
Yes, this is true.
And it drives people in different directions. I think it has a lot to do with the polarization that we see in politics today. And the thing about the Founding Fathers was, boy, they really argued with one another. I remember once Jefferson told Madison, he was mad at Hamilton about something, and he said to Madison, "Take up your pen and cut him to ribbons." Today, the founders knew how to compromise, ultimately. That was the point of the Constitution. And eventually, you would have to come and reason together. Today, I think social media makes it more difficult for the factions to compromise because they are so reinforced in their views, they only talk to each other.
And Amity, you write about this when you talk about the Great Depression and the environment in the United States at that moment. We used to have partisan media too, right? The newspapers at the 1930s, or if we talk about Father Coughlin and we talk about Huey Long and we talk about the rise of this very sort of, I guess I can say anti-American, populist sentiment that was sweeping through the United States in the 1930s. We've kind of been here before, haven't we?
Oh, we absolutely have, and maybe the change aren't the media, it's the 17th Amendment to the Constitution, to throw out a technical item. But when we moved away from a republic towards a democracy, we moved toward the people and sentiment and away from representative government and sometimes principle. So we got more populist over the course of the whole century, and Twitter is a feature of that. It can be good because ideas come to the fore, but it can be, as Dan says, groupthink, race to the bottom as well. What happened in the 30s was they hated each other's guts. There was, in that period, actually, by the end, the president was to the left of the media, so it was kind of a flip. The media were more right-center, the old newspaper, family in St. Louis or in Chicago. You know, Colonel McCormick was not a liberal. So it went the other way, but that was pretty tough. President Roosevelt didn't like the Annenbergs, and one of them ended up in jail for tax. So, you know, there's very...
You keep talking about jailing journalists. I'm getting a little nervous. Should Dana and I be nervous?
My point is just it's always been pretty tough.
Well, back at the founding, they used to tar and feather journalists and run them out of town on rails. I shouldn't mention that, give anyone an idea.
or simply have them beaten up because you didn't duel with them because they weren't gentlemen.
Well, at least some things haven't changed.
Yes, that's true.